The boardroom was quiet in a way it never was during meetings. The chairs were pushed back slightly, coffee cups left behind, the large screen still frozen on the last slide no one cared about anymore. Everyone had already left. Laughter and footsteps had faded down the hallway. The door clicked shut somewhere far away. He stayed seated. The single dad sat back in his chair, elbows resting on the armrests, fingers loosely clasped together. He stared at the table, not at the numbers, not at the reports, just the polished surface reflecting ceiling lights. He should have left. He always left early. That was his rule. Home before dark, dinner with his son, homework, stories before bed. But his body hadn't moved yet. That's when she stepped closer. She didn't sit. She leaned forward slightly, hands pressing against the edge of the long conference table. Her blazer was still perfect. Her posture was sharp, controlled, the kind that made entire rooms straighten when she entered. Billionaire CEO. The woman everyone listened to, everyone except him. "Why do you keep avoiding me?" Her voice was calm, but there was something underneath it. Frustration, confusion, maybe even hurt. He didn't look up. The silence stretched, thick, uncomfortable. "I've noticed it," she continued when he didn't respond. "You leave early. You change seats. You won't meet my eyes. If I speak to you, you give short answers and disappear." Still nothing. She leaned a little more, lowering her voice. "Did I do something?" That question finally made his jaw tighten. He exhaled slowly, as if he'd been holding his breath since the meeting ended. Since much longer than that, actually. "No," he said quietly. "You didn't." "Then tell me what it is." He shifted in his chair but stayed seated. Didn't stand. Didn't run. That alone felt like a mistake. "Why does it matter?" he asked. "You're the CEO. I'm just someone on your team." Her eyes sharpened. "Don't do that." "You know that's not true." He let out a humorless laugh. "Yeah, I do." Finally, slowly, he looked up. Their eyes met, and something in her chest dropped. He looked tired, not the kind of tired sleep fixes, the kind that settles into your bones, the kind that comes from years of responsibility you didn't plan for but never walked away from. "I avoid you," he said, voice low, steady. "Because looking at you hurts." The words hit the room hard. She straightened slightly, caught off guard. "Hurts how?" He shook his head once, like he already regretted saying anything at all. "Because every time I see you sitting at the head of that table, confident, successful, untouched by the past, I remember everything I lost." Her lips parted, but no words came out. "You moved on," he continued. "You built an empire. I built a life around bedtime schedules and school fees. I don't resent that. I just can't stand in the same room as the version of you who got everything while I buried the rest." "That's not fair," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. "Pain rarely is." He pushed his chair back and stood up, finally breaking eye contact. "I'm not asking for anything from you. Just let me keep my distance. That's how I survived this." He grabbed his bag, heading toward the door. She watched him walk away in an empty boardroom that suddenly felt too big, and for the first time she understood. He wasn't avoiding her because he hated her. He was avoiding her because loving her once had cost him more than he could afford to lose again. Before we continue the story, drop a comment telling me how you liked it, where you're watching from, and give this story a rating out of 10. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the best stories. He didn't go straight home that evening. That alone told him something was wrong. He sat in his car in the underground parking lot, engine off, phone face down on the passenger seat. The dashboard clock blinked at him, reminding him of time he didn't have. His son would be waiting, probably doing homework at the small kitchen table, probably asking the babysitter if his dad was late again. He rubbed his face with both hands. Why did she have to ask? He'd spent years perfecting distance, changing teams, keeping conversations short, turning shared history into something manageable. But one question in an empty boardroom had cracked everything open. Because looking at you hurts. He hated how true it sounded out loud. Above him, in her corner office, she stood by the window longer than she needed to. The city lights were starting to glow, buildings reflecting off glass and steel. This view was supposed to feel like victory. It usually did. Tonight, it felt hollow. She replayed his words again and again. Not the tone, not the bitterness, the pain behind them. She hadn't planned to confront him. It just happened. Weeks of being ignored had piled up until she couldn't pretend it didn't matter anymore. She told herself it was about professionalism. Respect. It wasn't. She'd recognized his walk the moment he joined the company months ago. The same shoulders, the same pause before speaking, the same way he listened more than he talked. She'd hired him anyway. That should have been her first warning. She picked up her phone, thumb hovering over his name. She didn't call, didn't text. Power had taught her many things. One of them was when not to use it. That night, he finally drove home. His son ran to him the moment he opened the door, small arms wrapping around his legs. "You're late." "I know," he said, kneeling, pulling him close. "I'm sorry." The apartment smelled like pasta and cheap tomato sauce. Familiar, safe, real. He needed that more than ever. After bedtime, he sat on the couch, lights off, phone in his hand. He didn't open her messages. There weren't any. Somehow that hurt too. Across the city, she poured herself a drink she barely touched. She thought about the version of herself he described. Untouched by the past, successful, moved on. None of it felt true. She'd loved him once, deeply, recklessly. And when ambition demanded a choice, she'd chosen the future she could control. She hadn't known it would cost her him, or that he'd build a life she was never invited into. The next morning, she saw him before he saw her. He stood near the coffee machine, tie slightly crooked, eyes focused on his phone. She almost walked past, almost respected the distance he asked for. Almost. "Can we talk?" she asked. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face before he masked it. "About work?" "No," she said. "About us." His shoulders stiffened. "There is no us." "Then why does it still hurt?" she asked. People moved around them, office noise, normalcy. But something between them had shifted. He hesitated, just for a moment. "That's exactly the problem," he said quietly. They stood there, inches apart, both realizing the same thing at the same time. This wasn't finished. It had just been paused. He avoided her for 3 days after that, not in obvious ways, not by skipping meetings or calling in sick. He stayed professional, polite, distant in the way only someone who once knew you too well could manage. She noticed everything. The way he chose a seat farthest from hers, the way his answers were careful, trimmed of anything personal, the way he stood up the second meetings ended, like remaining a second longer might undo him. It irritated her more than silence ever could. On the 4th day, she did something she rarely did. She waited. The office emptied slowly that evening. Keyboards clicked off one by one. Conversations faded. Lights dimmed. She stayed at her desk, pretending to review emails she wasn't reading, watching the glass reflection for movement. He was still there, seated at his workstation, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes locked on the screen but unfocused. She walked over quietly, stopping beside him instead of in front of him. "Less confrontation, more invitation. You don't have to answer me," she said. "But I need to say something." He didn't look up. "You already said enough." "I didn't," she replied. "I never said what I should have back then." That made him turn, slowly, carefully. Like he was bracing himself, she met his eyes. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving you." His throat tightened. "That's not helping." "I left because I was scared," she continued. "Scared of becoming small, scared of resenting you, scared of choosing a life that felt safe instead of one that felt limitless." "And now you have both," he said flatly. She shook her head. "I have success, not peace." He leaned back in his chair, jaw clenched. "You don't get to come back years later and explain yourself. I rebuilt my life from scratch." "I had to. I know," she said softly. "I see that. I see him." That single word changed the air between them. "My son," he said. "Yes." He looked away, rubbing a hand over his face. "You don't know what it's like To wake up every day knowing someone depends on you completely. There's no space for regret, no room for old wounds. And yet here you are, she said, still hurting. He didn't deny it. I don't want to disrupt your life, she added. I don't want to confuse your child or reopen something you worked hard to close. I just couldn't keep pretending we were strangers. He was quiet for a long moment. When you walked away, he said finally. I learned how to survive without you. What I don't know is how to exist around you. Her chest tightened. I'm not asking you to let me in all at once. He stood up then, towering just slightly over her. That's the problem. If I let you in even a little, I don't know how to stop. The honesty in his voice scared them both. Somewhere between regret and restraint, something fragile was forming. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, possibility. I'll keep my distance, she said, but I won't pretend you don't matter. He nodded once. That's all I can handle right now. They parted without touching, but for the first time in years, neither of them felt like they were running. Distance became their agreement, not spoken, not written, just understood. She stopped approaching him after hours, stopped cornering him with questions that dug too deep. He stopped leaving the room the second she entered. They learned how to exist in the same space without colliding. It wasn't easy. Some days, it almost felt normal, professional, clean. Other days, the air between them felt heavy, charged with things unsaid. She noticed how his shoulders relaxed when he laughed with coworkers. He noticed how her confidence softened when she wasn't performing for a room. Neither commented on it. Then came the company retreat. 2 days, 1 hotel, mandatory attendance for department leads. He tried to get out of it. Cited childcare issues, scheduling conflicts, anything that sounded reasonable. HR was sympathetic but firm. The company would cover travel for his son and arrange childcare during sessions. She didn't know he'd be there until she saw him checking in. The lobby was loud, busy, executives greeting each other, staff exchanging small talk. And there he was, holding his son's small backpack in one hand, talking quietly to the front desk. Her chest tightened. She hadn't seen him like that before. Not in this world. Not with the two lives intersecting so clearly. His son clung to his side, sleepy-eyed, curious, trusting. She stayed back, watched from a distance. Later that evening, after sessions ended and dinner wrapped up, she found herself sitting alone on the terrace. City lights below, cool air cutting through the day's exhaustion. Footsteps approached. Mind if I sit? He asked. She nodded. Of course. They sat a careful distance apart. He likes the hotel, he said, nodding toward the building. Thinks it's an adventure. She smiled faintly. Kids are good at that. He's my whole world, he added. Not defensive, just factual. I know, she said. I never doubted that. He studied her face, searching for something. You don't look disappointed. Why would I be? Most people are, he replied. When they realize I come with responsibility. She looked at him steadily. I'm not most people. Silence settled between them, not awkward, thoughtful. I used to imagine what life would have looked like if things were different, he admitted. Then I stopped. Because it hurt too much. And now? She asked. Now I don't know, he said honestly. Seeing you around him, it complicates things. I won't cross any lines, she said quickly. I won't step into his life unless you want me to. He nodded, relieved. Thank you. They sat there longer than they planned to. For the first time, he saw her not as the woman who left, but as someone standing still, waiting without pressure. For the first time, she saw him not as the man she lost, but as the man he'd become. Neither reached out, but something fragile was forming again. Not love, not yet. Trust. The retreat changed things in ways neither of them expected. Not dramatically, not overnight, just enough to shift the ground under their feet. Back at the office, their conversations became easier. Still careful, still professional, but no longer strained. He stopped flinching when she spoke to him. She stopped second-guessing every word she said around him. They learned each other's rhythms again, slowly, like people relearning a language they once spoke fluently. One evening, his babysitter canceled last minute. He stood in his office, phone pressed to his ear, frustration creeping into his voice as he tried backup after backup. No luck. His son sat on a chair near the door, swinging his legs, humming to himself. She passed by and stopped. "You okay?" she asked. He hesitated. Pride told him to say yes. Reality won. "My sitter canceled," he admitted. "I'll have to take him home. I've got a deadline I won't meet." She thought for a moment. "There's a quiet lounge upstairs. I work late anyway. He can stay with us, if you're comfortable." He studied her face. Sincere. No agenda. "Are you sure?" he asked. She nodded. "Absolutely." His son looked up at her. "Do you work here too?" She smiled, crouching slightly to his level. "I do." "Are you important?" the boy asked seriously. She laughed softly. "Only sometimes." That night, they worked side by side. Not too close, not too far. His son colored quietly nearby, occasionally asking questions or falling asleep against his dad's arm. She watched him without meaning to. The patience, the gentleness, the way he instinctively adjusted his posture so his son could sleep better. Something inside her softened. Later, as they walked to the parking lot, he spoke quietly. "Thank you. For tonight." "You don't have to thank me," she said. "It was, nice." He nodded. "It was," that word lingered. Nice, simple, honest, rare. That night she didn't feel alone in her success. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like he had to carry everything by himself. Still, neither crossed the line. They both knew how dangerous that could be. The call from the school came just before noon. He stared at his phone for a second longer than necessary before answering, already bracing himself. Parents learn that instinct fast. When the school calls in the middle of the workday, it's never nothing. "Yes?" he said, stepping into the hallway outside his office. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, too calm. His son had been involved in a fight. Nothing serious, she assured him. Another child, some pushing, some yelling. But his son was crying now, asking for his dad. Everything else faded, meetings, deadlines, the presentation he was supposed to review. None of it mattered. "I'll be there," he said, already grabbing his jacket. He didn't inform anyone, didn't ask permission. He just left. At the school, he knelt in front of his son, heart breaking at the sight of his red eyes and trembling lip. He listened, let him talk, let him cry, didn't interrupt, didn't lecture. "I was mad," his son admitted. "Everyone keeps saying I don't have a mom." His chest tightened. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said softly, pulling him close. "Being angry doesn't make you bad." On the drive home, his son fell asleep in the back seat. He watched him through the mirror, the small rise and fall of his chest grounding him. This was his real job. This was the life he chose and would choose again, every single time. But the guilt crept in anyway. Was he doing enough? Was he teaching him the right things? Was he strong enough to be everything his son needed? By the time he dropped his son off with a neighbor and returned to the office hours later, exhaustion clung to him like weight. Not physical, emotional. He walked back into the building quietly, hoping to disappear. She was waiting, not pacing, not dramatic, just standing near his office door holding a paper bag. He froze for a second. "You didn't tell anyone," she said gently. "I didn't have time," he replied, voice rough. "I know." She held up the bag. "I ordered food. You didn't eat." That did something to him. He stared at the bag longer than necessary. A stupid thing to focus on, but it felt like proof of something dangerous. Care, attention, presence. "You didn't have to," he said. "I wanted to," she replied simply. They sat inside his office, door left open on purpose. Transparency, safety. She handed him the food and waited without watching him eat, like she knew how vulnerable hunger could make a person. After a few quiet minutes, he spoke. "He got into a fight." She didn't react, just nodded. "Kids do that." "He's angry," he continued, "and I don't always know how to help him process it." "You're there," she said. That matters more than perfect answers. He laughed quietly, bitter and tired. You always say things like that. Make it sound simple. It's not simple, she replied. It's just important. Silence settled again. Then, without planning to, he said, I'm scared I'm failing him. The words surprised even him. She turned fully toward him now. Why would you think that? Because I'm tired, he said honestly. Because I don't always have patience. Because some days I'm just trying to survive, not guide. She listened, really listened. You're human, she said, not a failure. He looked away. You left before you saw this version of me. Her breath caught. I didn't leave because of you, she said carefully. But I know that doesn't erase what it did to you. No, he agreed. It doesn't. Their eyes met. For a moment, the room felt too small for everything between them. I'm afraid of wanting more than I can handle, he admitted. Of opening a door I spent years locking shut. She nodded slowly. I'm afraid of being the reason you regret opening it. Something shifted. He reached out without thinking. His fingers brushed against hers. The contact was light, almost accidental, but neither pulled away. I can't promise anything, he said quietly. I don't know what I'm capable of giving. I'm not asking for promises, she replied. Just honesty and time. That felt manageable. He nodded once. When their hands finally separated, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't awkward. It felt respectful. That night, after he went home and tucked his son into bed, he sat on the edge of the couch, thinking. Avoiding her had once felt like survival. Now, it felt like avoidance might cost him something too. Not immediately, but eventually. And for the first time, he wondered if healing didn't mean staying guarded forever. Maybe it meant learning when it was safe to lower the shield. After that day, nothing was said directly, and yet everything was different. They moved through the office like two people who shared a secret they hadn't named yet. Not the kind that made them giddy, the kind that made them careful, aware, conscious of every step. He noticed how she waited now. Didn't rush him, didn't push for conversations when his shoulders were tight or his replies shorter than usual. She respected the pauses, the quiet, the space he still needed. That alone meant more to him than she probably realized. She noticed how he stayed now, didn't immediately leave meetings, didn't vanish the second work ended. Sometimes he lingered, pretending to check emails while clearly thinking about something else. Sometimes he caught her looking at him and didn't look away. It was progress, slow, fragile, real. Then came the night everything nearly broke again. His son's fever spiked suddenly. It was past midnight when he noticed the warmth. Too warm. His son stirred restlessly, mumbling incoherent words. Panic crept in fast, sharp and familiar. He checked the thermometer twice, hoping the number would change. It didn't. He tried to stay calm, gave medicine, cool cloth, sat by the bed, watching every breath like it mattered more than his own. Parenting alone teaches you one brutal truth. There is no one to tag in when fear takes over. By morning, exhaustion sat heavy in his bones. He called in sick, voice tight, apologetic. He hated doing it, but there was no choice. His son needed him. She found out anyway. HR mentioned it casually. He won't be in today. Family emergency. Family. That word stuck with her. All day she debated with herself. 100 reasons told her to stay away. Boundaries, respect, his request for space, and one quiet reason told her to go. Care. By evening, she stood outside his apartment building with a grocery bag in her hand, heart beating harder than she expected. She hadn't texted, hadn't called. She didn't want to intrude, but turning back felt wrong. She knocked once. He opened the door slowly, surprise clear on his face, followed quickly by hesitation. You didn't have to come, he said quietly. I know, she replied, but I wanted to. He stepped aside. Inside, the apartment was modest, clean but lived in. Toys neatly stacked in one corner. A small couch, a kitchen table that doubled as a homework station. The bedroom door was slightly open. His son lay asleep, breathing shallow but steady. He finally went down, he whispered. She nodded, lowering her voice instinctively. How's the fever? Better, he said. For now. They sat at the kitchen table. She unpacked the groceries without asking. Soup, juice, crackers, the basics, the things you buy when you're worried about someone. He watched her quietly. This is crossing a line, he said suddenly. She stopped, meeting his eyes. Tell me to leave. He didn't. Instead, he ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion making his movements slower than usual. I've spent years making sure nothing gets close enough to shake my balance. And is it working? She asked gently. He laughed under his breath. Not as well as I pretend. Silence filled the space, comfortable, heavy. I don't regret my life, he said after a moment. Just so you know. I never thought you did, she replied. My son saved me, he continued. Gave me purpose when everything else fell apart. But sometimes I wonder if I built walls so high that nothing good can get in either. Her chest tightened. Walls protect you when you're bleeding. They don't have to stay forever. He looked at her then, really looked. And what if I let you in, he asked, voice low, and you decide someday that this life is too small for you? The question wasn't angry. It was afraid. She didn't answer immediately, didn't rush to reassure him with empty promises. She thought carefully before speaking. I won't lie to you, she said. This life is different from mine. It's quieter, harder in ways money can't fix. He nodded. But it's real, she continued. And right now, real matters more to me than big. He swallowed. I can't afford to fall apart again, he said. Not with him depending on me. I wouldn't ask you to, she replied. I don't want to replace anything in your life. I just want to stand beside it, if you'll let me. That did it. Something in him finally gave. Not all at once, not dramatically, just a small crack. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. I don't know how to let someone care without feeling like I'm risking everything. She reached across the table slowly, giving him time to pull away. He didn't. Her hand rested over his, warm, steady. You don't have to know everything, she said. Just don't shut me out. He closed his eyes briefly, exhaling. When he opened them, the tension in his shoulders had softened. I don't want to avoid you anymore, he said quietly. But I need to move slowly. She nodded. So do I. They sat like that for a long time. No kiss, no declarations, just hands touching, trust forming one honest moment at a time. When she finally stood to leave, he walked her to the door. At the threshold, she paused. I'm not here to disrupt your life. I know, he said, and I won't disappear, she added. Not unless you ask me to. He met her gaze, something steady replacing fear. Don't. She smiled softly and left. That night, after checking his son's temperature one last time, he sat alone in the quiet apartment. Avoiding her had once felt like protection. Now it felt like he might lose something important if he kept running. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe that healing didn't mean staying alone forever. It meant learning how to stay. They didn't rush into anything after that night. And strangely, that's what made it real. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into a quiet rhythm neither of them named out loud. She didn't suddenly become a fixture in his home. He didn't reshape his life to fit her schedule. Instead, they met in the middle, carefully, like two people walking across thin ice who understood the cost of moving too fast. She learned his routine without asking. School drop-offs, early mornings, grocery runs squeezed between deadlines. He learned hers, too. Late nights, investor calls across time zones, the weight of decisions that affected thousands of people, even when she looked calm on the outside. They talked more now, about work, about mistakes, about the things they never said when they were younger because they didn't know how. One evening, months later, he invited her over for dinner. Not a crisis, not exhaustion, just dinner. His son eyed her cautiously at first. Kids always know when something matters, She didn't force conversation, didn't try to impress. She listened when he talked about school, asked questions, let him lead. Later, when his son went to bed, he stood by the sink, washing dishes, quiet. "You don't have to be nervous," she said gently. "I'm not," he replied. Then paused. "Okay, maybe a little," she smiled. "That makes two of us." He turned to face her, serious now. "I need to say something." She waited. "I can't give you a simple life," he said. "There are days I'm stretched thin, days I'll choose him over everything else, days I won't be easy to love." She nodded. "I don't need easy." He studied her face, searching for cracks. "And if I shut down, then I'll stay," she said. "Not to fix you, just to be there." The words settled between them. This time, when he reached for her hand, he held it. Not desperately, not like he was afraid she'd disappear, just steady. They didn't kiss right away. The moment didn't need it. What mattered was that neither of them pulled back. Later that night, when she left, he stood in the doorway again. But this time she turned back. "I'm not going anywhere," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. The office noticed the change before they ever spoke about it publicly. Meetings felt lighter. He spoke more. She listened more. They weren't hiding, but they weren't advertising either. It wasn't about optics. It was about respect. One afternoon, as they walked out together, someone joked, "Looks like you two finally figured it out." They exchanged a glance. Not embarrassed, not defensive, just honest. "Yeah," he said simply. "We did." Months later, they stood at his son's school play, shoulder to shoulder. She clapped louder than anyone. His son waved at them from the stage, proud. That was when it hit him. He wasn't afraid anymore. Not of her, not of the past, not of loving someone again. Because this time, love didn't ask him to choose. It made space. Later that night, after his son was asleep, they sat on the couch, legs touching, quiet. "You know," he said, "there was a time I avoided you because looking at you hurt." She nodded. "I remember. Now," he continued, "looking at you feels like healing." Her eyes softened. "I didn't come back to fix anything." "I know," he said. "You came back to stay." They leaned into each other then, no rush, no fear, just two people who had grown enough to meet again without losing themselves. This story teaches us that timing matters, but growth matters more. Love doesn't always fail because it wasn't real. Sometimes it fails because the people involved weren't ready yet. Healing isn't about going back to what was lost. It's about becoming strong enough to build something better.